Olivia never thought her marriage would end like this. Not when she was 8 months pregnant, her belly round and firm with the child they had tried for nearly 2 years to conceive. Not on a Tuesday afternoon with rain threatening in the dark clouds overhead, and certainly not with her clothes and personal items packed hastily into 3 mismatched suitcases that now sat on the front porch of what had been their home. She stood there, keys still in hand, staring at Thomas as if he were a stranger. In many ways, he had become one over the past few months. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice oddly flat. "I'm not ready to be a father." Olivia felt her world tilt sideways. "What are you talking about? We've been planning this baby for years." She placed a protective hand over her stomach, feeling a small kick in response. "You were there at all the appointments. You painted the nursery." Thomas looked away, unable to meet her eyes. "I made a mistake. I thought I wanted this, but I don't." He ran his fingers through his hair, a nervous habit she once found endearing. "I need space to figure things out." "Space?" Olivia repeated, her voice rising. "I'm due in 4 weeks." The first fat raindrop landed on her cheek, or maybe it was a tear. She couldn't tell anymore as the sky opened up above them. "You can stay with your mom," Thomas suggested, as if he were offering a weekend getaway rather than homelessness to his pregnant wife. "My mother lives in a retirement community 2 states away," Olivia replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. "You know that." They stood in silence as the rain grew heavier, soaking through Olivia's light jacket. She had just come from her doctor's appointment, where everything had checked out perfectly. The baby was healthy, in the right position, and measuring right on schedule. She had stopped for groceries on the way home, planning to make Thomas's favorite pasta dish tonight. Those grocery bags were still in the car. "What happened?" she asked quietly. "Just tell me that much. Did you meet someone else?" Thomas shook his head, but there was something in his expression that made Olivia doubt him. He had been working late for months now, ever since his promotion at the investment firm. Weekend trips with clients, constant phone calls he would take in another room. She had trusted him completely, never questioning his dedication to work. How foolish she felt now. "I just can't do this," he repeated, stepping back toward the door. "My lawyer will contact you about the divorce and support for the baby." The way he said the baby, not our baby or our child, cut through Olivia like a knife. "You can't just throw me out. This is my home too," she protested, her voice cracking. "Where am I supposed to go tonight?" Thomas looked uncomfortable but resolute. "I booked you a hotel room for the week." He held out a folded piece of paper with the reservation details. "It should give you enough time to figure something out." Olivia didn't take the paper. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking through her clothes, but she barely noticed. Her mind raced through options, friends she could call, relatives who might take her in. But most of her close friends had moved away over the years, and her family was scattered across the country. There was her cousin Lisa, who lived about an hour away. They weren't particularly close, but Lisa had always been kind. Would she be willing to take in a heavily pregnant woman with no warning? "Can we at least talk about this?" Olivia pleaded. "You don't just wake up one morning and decide to end a 5-year marriage. Something happened." Thomas checked his watch, an expensive gift she had given him for their anniversary last year, using money she had saved from her teaching job. "I have a conference call in 15 minutes. The hotel reservation is under your name. I'll have my lawyer reach out tomorrow." With that, he stepped inside and closed the door. Olivia heard the lock click into place. She stood there, rain pouring down, staring at the door that had just closed on her marriage, her home, and the future she had planned. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, as if protesting the sudden chaos. Finally, survival instinct kicked in. She couldn't stand in the rain forever. Olivia pulled out her phone, grateful for its waterproof case, and scrolled through her contacts. Her finger hovered over Lisa's name, but then continued scrolling until it reached a name she hadn't called in years. Jen, her younger sister. They had barely spoken since their father's funeral 3 years ago, when a disagreement over their mother's care had escalated into hurtful words neither of them truly meant. Pride and stubbornness had kept them apart since then, with only brief text messages on birthdays and holidays. But Jen lived just 2 hours away. And despite everything, she was family. Olivia took a deep breath and pressed call, moving to stand under the small overhang of the porch to escape the worst of the rain. The phone rang 4 times, and Olivia was preparing herself for voicemail when Jen answered. Olivia? Her sister sounded surprised. Is everything okay? The simple question broke something inside Olivia. A sob escaped before she could stop it. No, she managed. Everything is very much not okay. 30 minutes later, Olivia sat in her car in the parking lot of a roadside diner, waiting for the rain to ease up. She had given Jen a brief explanation over the phone, trying to maintain what little dignity she had left. Jen's response had been immediate and without hesitation. Come here now. I have a spare room, and you're staying with me until we figure this out. The relief had been so overwhelming that Olivia had to sit in her car for several minutes before she trusted herself to drive. She had managed to bring her suitcases to the car one by one, each trip through the rain a reminder of how quickly life could fall apart. As she waited, she scrolled through her phone, looking at photos from just a few months ago. Thomas, with his hand on her barely showing belly, smiling proudly at a family barbecue. Thomas assembling the crib, surrounded by instruction sheets and tiny screws. Thomas at the ultrasound appointment, tears in his eyes when they found out they were having a little girl. What had changed? When had his smile become forced? Had he been planning this for weeks, waiting for the right moment to end things? Or had it been a sudden decision? Some breaking point reached just today. Olivia placed her phone on the passenger seat and gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady her breathing. The baby seemed to sense her distress, moving restlessly. She placed a gentle hand on her stomach. It's going to be okay, she whispered, not sure if she was reassuring the baby or herself. We're going to be okay. The rain lightened to a drizzle and Olivia started the car. The drive to Jen's place would take about 2 hours, but first, she needed to make a stop. Her doctor had given her a prescription for iron supplements at her appointment today, and with everything that had happened, she had forgotten to fill it. Her health and the baby's health had to come first, regardless of the personal earthquake that had just shattered her life. As she drove to the pharmacy, Olivia tried to focus on immediate needs rather than the looming questions. Where would she live after staying with Jen? How would she support herself and a newborn? Should she fight for the house and the divorce? What about health insurance and hospital bills? The weight of uncertainty pressed down on her, threatening to crush her spirit completely. But each time the darkness seemed too much, her daughter would kick or roll, reminding Olivia that she couldn't fall apart. Not now. Someone was counting on her. At the pharmacy, the young woman behind the counter noticed Olivia's red-rimmed eyes and rain-soaked appearance, but kindly pretended not to see. She processed the prescription quickly and added a gentle, "Take care of yourself," as she handed over the bag. Back in the car, Olivia sent a text to Jen. "On my way. Thank you." The reply came immediately. "Drive safe. Doors unlocked. I'm making up the bed for you now." Those simple words, evidence of care and concern, brought fresh tears to Olivia's eyes. She hadn't realized how desperately she needed someone to be on her side right now. The drive to Jen's apartment passed in a blur of rain-slicked roads and tangled thoughts. Olivia tried to call Thomas twice more, but the calls went straight to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. What could she possibly say? By the time she pulled into Jen's apartment complex, the rain had stopped completely and weak sunshine was breaking through the clouds. Olivia wanted to see it as a sign, some cosmic reassurance that things would improve, but she was too numb for optimism. She parked in a visitor spot and sat for a moment, gathering whatever strength remained. Then she took a deep breath, picked up her purse, and opened the car door. One step at a time, she told herself. That was all she could manage right now. One step at a time. Jen was waiting at the open door of her second-floor apartment when Olivia finally made it up the stairs, pausing twice to catch her breath. Pregnancy and emotional exhaustion had drained what little energy she had left. "Let me help you with those," Jen said, hurrying down to take the lightest of the 3 suitcases. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of Olivia's belly, bigger than it had appeared in the few photos they'd exchanged over text in recent months. The sisters stood looking at each other for a moment, the weight of their 3-year estrangement hanging between them. Then Jen stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Olivia as best she could. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Olivia hadn't realized how desperately she needed to hear those words until they were spoken. She leaned into her sister's embrace and let the tears come again. Inside, Jen's apartment was small but cozy, with mismatched furniture and colorful art on the walls. The guest room was really more of an office with a fold-out couch, but Jen had already made it up with sheets and pillows. "It's not much," Jen said apologetically, "but the couch is actually pretty comfortable. I've fallen asleep on it plenty of times while working late." "It's perfect," Olivia replied, meaning it. "I can't thank you enough. You don't need to thank me. You're my sister." Jen tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. "Are you hungry? I made some soup." Olivia realized she hadn't eaten since breakfast. Starving, actually. Over soup and bread. Olivia told Jen everything. How Thomas had grown distant over the past few months, how he stayed later and later at work, how he'd stopped touching her belly or talking about the baby. "I knew something was wrong," she admitted, stirring her spoon absently through the remaining broth. "But I thought it was just nerves about becoming a father. I never imagined he would do this." Jen's face darkened with anger. "He's a coward. To do this when you're 8 months pregnant, I don't care what he's going through, there's no excuse. I keep thinking about what I missed, what signs I ignored." Olivia's voice cracked. "Was he cheating? Did he just decide he didn't want a family after all? How do you just change your mind like that?" "This isn't your fault," Jen said firmly. "None of it. And you're not alone in this. I'm here." Those simple words, "I'm here," were like a life raft in the stormy sea of Olivia's thoughts. That night, lying on Jen's fold-out couch, Olivia stared at the unfamiliar ceiling. She could hear Jen moving around in the kitchen, quietly cleaning up. The baby kicked and rolled as if trying to remind Olivia that whatever happened, they were in this together. She reached for her phone and saw 3 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize. There was also a text from Thomas. "My lawyer will call you tomorrow. I've transferred some money to your account for immediate expenses. No apology. No explanation. Just business." Olivia put the phone down without replying. What could she possibly say? Part of her wanted to scream at him to demand answers. Another part wanted to beg him to reconsider, to remember the life they had planned together. But a small growing part of her, the part that had felt the first stirrings of maternal fierceness when the doctor placed her hand on the ultrasound image and said, "There's your baby," that part was beginning to understand that she needed to focus on moving forward, not looking back. Morning came too quickly. Olivia woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Jen talking on the phone in the kitchen. "Yes, she's staying with me. No, I don't know for how long." "That's really not your business, Mom." Olivia winced. Their mother. Of course Jen would have told her. She struggled to sit up, her back aching from the unfamiliar bed and the weight of her pregnancy. By the time she made it to the bathroom and freshened up, Jen had ended the call and was making breakfast. "Sorry if I woke you," Jen said, sliding a plate of eggs across the counter. "Mom called, and you know how she gets." Olivia nodded. Their mother meant well, but her idea of support usually involved a lot of unsolicited advice and thinly veiled criticism. "What did she say?" Olivia asked, bracing herself. "Oh, the usual. She's worried. She wants to come visit. She thinks you should hire the most aggressive lawyer you can find and take Thomas for everything he's worth." Jen rolled her eyes. "I told her to give you some space to figure things out first." "Thank you." Olivia poked at her eggs. "I don't even know where to start. I need to find a place to live, figure out my health insurance situation, prepare for the baby." "One step at a time," Jen reminded her. "First eat your breakfast, then shower, then we'll make a list." By mid-morning, Olivia had received the call from Thomas's lawyer, a woman with a voice like honey but words like steel. The terms she outlined were clear. Thomas would provide financial support for the baby after a paternity test confirmed he was the father. He would allow Olivia to stay in the house until 1 month after the birth, at which point it would be sold and the proceeds divided. In the meantime, he would be staying at a hotel. "He's willing to be quite generous with the child support," the lawyer said, as if Thomas deserved a medal for meeting his basic legal obligations. "And what about me?" Olivia asked. "I've been teaching part-time so we could start a family at his suggestion. I can't work full-time with a newborn. My client is offering 3 months of support for you, which is more than required by law in your state for a marriage of this duration." 3 months. As if she could rebuild her entire life in 3 months with a newborn baby. After the call, Olivia sat at Jen's kitchen table, trying to process what she'd just heard. I can't believe he wants a paternity test, she said finally. As if I would. As if the baby could be anyone else's. Jen's expression hardened. He's trying to hurt you. Don't let him. What am I going to do, Jen? The money he's offering won't last long. I need to find a job, a place to live, childcare. The enormity of it all threatened to overwhelm her. You're going to take it one day at a time, Jen said, pulling out a notebook. Let's make that list. Together, they outlined immediate needs and future concerns. Olivia needed to contact her doctor about transferring her care closer to Jen's apartment. She needed to reach out to her school principal about her maternity leave situation. She needed to apply for emergency assistance programs for single mothers. As they worked, Olivia felt a strange calm replacing some of her panic. There was something empowering about taking action, about making concrete plans instead of just reacting to Thomas's abandonment. By afternoon, she had made several calls, including one to a former colleague who now worked at a school near Jen's apartment. To Olivia's surprise, her friend mentioned that they were looking for a part-time English teacher for the following semester. It wouldn't start until January, but it might be perfect for you once the baby is a few months old, her friend said. The hours are flexible and they're very supportive of working parents. It wasn't a solution to all her problems, but it was a glimmer of hope, a possible path forward that she hadn't seen before. That evening, Jen insisted they get out of the apartment. You need fresh air and a change of scenery, she declared. There's a community center down the street with a prenatal yoga class. It's probably the gentlest exercise known to humankind, but it might help with your back pain. Olivia was reluctant, but Jen was persuasive. An hour later, she found herself in a room with 8 other pregnant women, following an instructor through movements that did, surprisingly, ease some of the ache in her lower back. After class, a woman about Olivia's age approached her. First time here, right? I'm Lily. Olivia. She felt suddenly self-conscious, aware that she wasn't wearing a wedding ring. She'd taken it off after the call with Thomas's lawyer, unable to bear the weight of it any longer. There's a group of us that usually grab tea after class, Lily continued, seemingly oblivious to Olivia's discomfort. You're welcome to join. Olivia started to decline, but Jen appeared at her side. She'd love to, her sister answered for her. And so would I. And so Olivia found herself at a nearby cafe surrounded by women in various stages of pregnancy, listening to their stories and sharing carefully edited versions of her own. These were strangers, but there was something comforting about being with people who understood at least some of what she was going through physically, even if her personal circumstances were different. When one woman complained about her husband snoring keeping her awake, Olivia felt a pang of grief for the partnership she had lost. But when another talked about her fears of being an adequate mother, Olivia found herself offering reassurance, drawing on the books she'd read and the classes she'd taken. You seem like you've really prepared, Lily commented. I thought I was prepared for everything, Olivia replied with a sad smile. Turns out life had other plans. Later, walking back to the apartment with Jen, Olivia felt something she hadn't expected to feel so soon. A tiny spark of resilience, like a pilot light that refused to go out despite the strongest winds. Thank you for making me go, she told her sister. I needed that more than I realized. Jen squeezed her hand. You're stronger than you think, Liv. You always have been. Olivia wasn't sure she believed that yet. But for the first time since Thomas had closed the door on their marriage, she could imagine a future, different from the one she had planned, but perhaps not without its own kind of hope. The days blended together as Olivia settled into a routine at Jen's apartment. Morning sickness had long passed, but in its place came new discomforts, swollen ankles, heartburn, and the increasingly urgent kicks of a baby girl who seemed determined to make her presence known. 2 weeks had passed since Thomas had pushed her out of their life. 2 weeks of unanswered texts and calls that went straight to voicemail. 2 weeks of slowly rebuilding what felt like the shattered pieces of her future. I need to go back to the house, Olivia announced one morning over breakfast. There are things I need, the baby's things. Jen looked up from her coffee, concern written across her face. Are you sure that's a good idea? I can go for you, Olivia shook her head. I need to do this myself. His lawyer said he's staying at a hotel, so the house should be empty. She rested her hand on her belly. Besides, I've been hiding out here long enough. I can't avoid the real world forever. The drive back to what had once been her home felt surreal. The tree-lined street looked exactly the same. Neighbors walking dogs, children riding bikes, sprinklers turning lazily on perfectly maintained lawns. But everything had changed. Olivia parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, gathering her courage. The key still worked in the lock, though she half expected Thomas to have changed it. Inside, the house was unnervingly tidy, as if no one lived there at all. No dishes in the sink. No shoes by the door. No mail on the counter. She moved through the rooms like a ghost, collecting what she needed. Her prenatal vitamins from the bathroom cabinet. The framed ultrasound picture from the nightstand. Her laptop and teaching materials from the office. Then she stood in the doorway of what was supposed to be the nursery. Thomas had painted it a soft yellow just 2 months ago, laughing as Olivia directed him from a safe distance, both of them careful about paint fumes. The crib was assembled, the changing table stocked with diapers and wipes. A rocking chair sat in the corner, a handmade blanket from Olivia's grandmother draped over its arm, all of it waiting for a baby who would never come home to this house. Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes, but she blinked them away. There wasn't time for that now. She needed to be practical. She found a box in the garage and carefully packed the most important items: the blanket, a stuffed bunny she'd bought when they first started trying for a baby, the sound machine they'd researched for hours. The crib and changing table would have to stay for now. She couldn't move them alone, and she wasn't sure where she would put them anyway. As she was making a final trip to her car, the neighbor from across the street spotted her. "Olivia, how are you, dear? We haven't seen you in a while." Mrs. Chen had lived across from them since they'd moved in, bringing over homemade dumplings to welcome them to the neighborhood. She was in her 70s and knew everything that happened on their street. "I've been staying with my sister," Olivia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just picking up some things." Mrs. Chen's eyes flickered to Olivia's belly, then to the box in her arms, understanding dawning on her face. "Is everything all right with you and Thomas?" The simple question nearly broke Olivia's composure. "We're taking some time apart." "I see." Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "Well, if you need anything at all, you know where to find me. My grandson just moved out for college, so I have plenty of extra food these days." The kindness from this near stranger was almost harder to bear than Thomas's cruelty. "Thank you," Olivia managed before hurrying to put the box in her car. Back at Jen's apartment, Olivia found her sister on the phone, her expression unusually animated. "She's just walked in, actually," Jen was saying. "Let me ask her." She covered the mouthpiece with her hand. "It's Diane from college. Remember her? She's looking for someone to help with content writing for her company's website. Remote work, flexible hours. I mentioned your situation and she wants to talk to you." Olivia blinked in surprise. Diane had been a year ahead of them in college. Always friendly, but never a close friend. "She wants to hire me? Just like that?" "Just talk to her," Jen urged, holding out the phone. 30 minutes later, Olivia had a part-time job. It wasn't teaching, but it was work she could do from Jen's apartment, even with a newborn. The pay wasn't spectacular, but combined with the meager support Thomas was providing, it might be enough to rent a small place of her own eventually. "I can't believe that just happened," Olivia said as she ended the call. Jen grinned. "I might have been making some calls on your behalf. Diane's not the only one who offered to help. People care about you, Liv." For the first time in weeks, Olivia felt a glimmer of something like hope. "Thank you. That's what sisters are for." Jen's smile faltered slightly. "I'm sorry we wasted so much time being angry at each other." Olivia reached for her sister's hand. "We're making up for it now." The next day, Olivia found herself at the local community center again, this time for a different kind of meeting. The flyer had caught her eye after the yoga class. New Beginnings, support group for single parents. She hesitated outside the door, suddenly unsure. Was she ready to call herself a single parent? To sit in a room full of strangers and talk about the mess her life had become? Before she could turn away, a woman about her age approached. "First time?" she asked with a sympathetic smile. "It's not as scary as it seems, I promise." The woman introduced herself as Robin, a single mother of a 2-year-old. "My husband decided parenthood wasn't for him about 6 months after our son was born," she explained as they found seats. "Left me for his 23-year-old assistant." Classic, right? Despite everything, Olivia found herself laughing. There was something refreshing about Robin's matter-of-fact attitude. The meeting itself was better than Olivia had expected. No one pushed her to share more than she was comfortable with. Instead, they talked about practical things, local resources for single parents, affordable childcare options, time management strategies. Olivia took notes, feeling like she was preparing for a particularly challenging exam. The hardest part isn't the practical stuff, though, said an older man who had been raising his daughter alone for 8 years. It's letting go of the life you thought you were going to have. Once you do that, you can start building something new, letting go. Olivia wasn't sure she was ready for that yet. Part of her still woke up each morning expecting to find Thomas beside her, to have the last few weeks revealed as nothing more than a bad dream. But another part, the part that had applied for health insurance on her own, that had started working on Diane's content projects, that had begun looking at apartment listings in Jen's neighborhood, that part was already moving forward. As she was leaving the meeting, Robin caught up with her. A bunch of us get together for coffee sometimes outside of these meetings, just to talk about normal stuff, you know? Not always about being single parents. You should join us. Olivia found herself agreeing before she'd really thought about it. The idea of having friends again, people who understood what she was going through, was too appealing to pass up. That evening, as she and Jen were eating dinner, Olivia felt a sharp pain that made her gasp and drop her fork. "What's wrong?" Jen asked, instantly alarmed. "Just a contraction, I think," Olivia said, trying to sound calmer than she felt. "Probably those practice ones the doctor mentioned, Braxton Hicks." But 15 minutes later, another pain gripped her, this one stronger than the last. "I think we should call your doctor," Jen said, already reaching for her phone. The doctor's instructions were clear. Since Olivia was only 36 weeks along, she should come to the hospital to be evaluated. "It's probably nothing," Olivia kept saying as Jen helped her to the car. First-time mothers usually go past their due dates, not early. But by the time they reached the hospital, the contractions were coming regularly, 5 minutes apart. The nurse who examined her confirmed what Olivia was beginning to suspect. She was in labor. "But it's too early," she protested. "I'm not ready," the nurse patted her hand. "Babies have their own schedules, honey. And 36 weeks isn't so bad. Most babies are just fine at this stage." Olivia looked at Jen, panic rising in her throat. "I don't have a crib. I don't have a car seat. I don't have anything ready." "Hey," Jen said, gripping her hand tightly. "We'll figure it out. That's what we've been doing, right? Figuring it out as we go." As another contraction built, Olivia tried to focus on her breathing the way she'd learned in the prenatal classes she'd attended with Thomas, classes he'd sat through while apparently planning his escape. "Should we call him?" Jen asked quietly once the contraction had passed. Olivia started to shake her head, then stopped. Despite everything, Thomas was still this baby's father. He deserved to know. "You can try," she said finally. "But don't be surprised if he doesn't answer." As Jen stepped out to make the call, Olivia closed her eyes. This wasn't how she had imagined bringing her daughter into the world. Alone in a hospital room, nothing prepared, her life in pieces around her. But she wasn't really alone, she realized. Jen was here. New friends were just a phone call away. A community of people who had walked this path before her were ready to offer support. And most importantly, her daughter was coming. Ready or not. Another contraction began, stronger than the last. Olivia breathed through it, one hand cradling her belly. "We can do this," she whispered. Together. Hours melted into one another as Olivia's labor progressed. The hospital room became her entire world. The beeping monitors, the squeaky vinyl chair where Jen dozed between contractions, the encouraging smiles of nurses who came and went like clockwork. "You're doing great," they told her. First babies often take their time. Time was something Olivia had plenty of to think. Between contractions, her mind wandered to Thomas. Had Jen reached him? Would he come? Did she even want him to? "Any word?" she asked when Jen returned from getting coffee. Her sister's expression said everything. "His phone still goes to voicemail. I left another message." Olivia nodded, unsurprised but still hurt. Another contraction built, stronger than the last, and she gripped the bed rails, focusing on her breathing. "The doctor's coming to check you again," Jen said, pressing a cool cloth to Olivia's forehead. "They think you might be getting close. Close." The word had so many meanings now. Close to meeting her daughter. Close to becoming a mother. Close to starting a life she'd never imagined. The doctor confirmed what the nurses suspected. It was almost time to push. The room transformed around her. Equipment appearing, more staff arriving. Olivia felt a wave of panic. "I can't do this," she whispered to Jen. "I'm not ready." Jen squeezed her hand. "You can. You're the strongest person I know." Somewhere in the fog of pain and fear, Olivia found her determination. With each contraction, she pushed toward a new beginning. And at 3:17 in the morning, after 19 hours of labor, her daughter arrived with a powerful cry that filled the room. "She's perfect," the doctor announced, placing the tiny, squirming bundle on Olivia's chest. Through tears, Olivia looked down at her daughter's face, red and angry and absolutely beautiful. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, a dusting of dark hair and eyes that, when they briefly opened, seemed to hold all the wisdom in the world. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I'm your mom." The rush of love was overwhelming, fierce and protective, and unlike anything she'd ever felt before. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not Thomas's abandonment, not her uncertain future, nothing but this perfect being in her arms. They named her Charlotte after Olivia's grandmother. 6 pounds, 2 ounces of determination and hope. The next few days passed in a blur of feeding attempts, diaper changes, and stolen moments of sleep. The hospital staff showed Olivia how to nurse, how to swaddle, how to care for Charlotte's umbilical cord. Every new skill felt like a victory, a step toward confidence. Jen stayed by her side, learning alongside her, taking photos, running interference with the few visitors who stopped by. Olivia's principal, a couple of colleagues, Robin from the support group, but not Thomas. He never called back, never came, never acknowledged his daughter's arrival. On the 3rd day, as Olivia was preparing to be discharged, a nurse came in with an odd expression. "There's someone here to see you," she said hesitantly. "She says she's your mother-in-law." Olivia and Jen exchanged surprised glances. Patricia, Thomas's mother, had always been polite but distant, living 3 states away and visiting only on major holidays. "Should I tell her to come back later?" the nurse asked. "No, it's okay," Olivia said, though she quickly checked her appearance in the small mirror by the bathroom door. She looked exhausted, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing the one decent maternity dress Jen had brought for her to go home in. Patricia appeared in the doorway, looking somehow both immaculate and completely disheveled. Her gray hair was perfectly styled, her clothes expensive and tasteful, but her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands shaking slightly. "Olivia," she said, her voice catching. "I just heard." "About the baby?" Olivia gestured to the bassinet where Charlotte was sleeping. "Her name is Charlotte." Patricia moved slowly to the bassinet, looking down at her granddaughter with an expression of wonder and grief. "She looks like him. When he was born." The comparison to Thomas sent a pang through Olivia's heart. "Why are you here, Patricia?" The question came out more bluntly than she'd intended. Patricia turned to her, tears brimming in her eyes. "You don't know, do you?" "Know what?" "Thomas is in the hospital. He collapsed at work 2 days ago. A stroke." The room seemed to tilt around Olivia. "A stroke? But he's only 34. Patricia sank into the chair beside the bed. It was the tumor. A brain tumor. He was diagnosed 6 months ago. The words hung in the air, impossible to process. 6 months ago, when he'd started working late, when he'd become distant, when everything had changed. "That's not possible," Olivia said, her voice hollow. "He would have told me." "He didn't tell anyone," Patricia replied. "Not even me. His doctor called me after the stroke. Apparently, Thomas made him promise not to contact family unless—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Unless what?" Jen demanded. "Unless it was an emergency," Patricia finished. "He's in critical condition. The doctors aren't sure if he's going to make it." Olivia felt as if she were floating outside her body, watching the scene from a distance. Thomas dying. Thomas keeping a deadly secret. Thomas pushing her away not because he didn't want their child, but because— "Why?" she asked, the single word containing all her confusion and pain. "Why wouldn't he tell me?" Patricia wiped at her tears. "The doctor said Thomas refused treatment at first. By the time he changed his mind, the tumor had grown. The surgery was high risk. He told the doctor he didn't want to put you through watching him deteriorate. She looked up, her eyes pleading for understanding. He thought he was protecting you, protecting her. The word seemed absurd. He had thrown her out of their home, cut off communication, left her to give birth alone. How was any of that protection? But even through her anger, a terrible understanding was beginning to dawn. Thomas had always been the one to handle difficult things, to shield her from pain when he could. It was one of the things she'd loved about him, his protectiveness. But this misguided attempt to spare her had caused more pain than honesty ever could have. "Where is he?" Olivia asked. "Memorial Hospital downtown. The neurology ICU." Patricia hesitated. Would you come with me to see him?" "I know you must hate him right now, but I don't hate him," Olivia interrupted, surprising herself with the truth of it. She felt anger, betrayal, hurt, but not hate. "Never hate. But I can't leave Charlotte. We're being discharged today." "The baby can come too," Patricia said quickly. "Thomas should meet his daughter. While he still can." The weight of those last 4 words hung in the room. While he still can, Jen, who had been silent through much of this exchange, spoke up. "I'll help. We can make this work." 2 hours later, after a flurry of discharge paperwork and a crash course in installing the car seat Patricia had hastily purchased, they arrived at Memorial Hospital. The neurology ICU was quiet, the lighting dim, the air heavy with antiseptic and despair. Patricia led them to Thomas's room, pausing outside the door. "He doesn't look like himself," she warned. "There are a lot of machines." Olivia nodded, adjusting Charlotte in her arms. The baby was asleep, bundled in the blanket from Olivia's grandmother, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding around her. Nothing could have prepared Olivia for the sight of Thomas. His head was partly shaved and bandaged, his face swollen, tubes running from his arms and nose. Monitors beeped steadily beside the bed, tracking vital signs that seemed impossibly fragile. This was the man who had broken her heart. The man who had left her when she needed him most. The man whose reasons, while finally clear, still felt like excuses. But it was also the man she had loved for 6 years. The man who had cried when they saw their baby on the ultrasound. The man who, in his own terribly misguided way, had thought he was doing the right thing. Olivia moved to the bedside, Charlotte cradled against her chest. "Thomas," she said softly, "I'm here, and there's someone you need to meet." His eyes remained closed, his breathing controlled by machines. The doctor had warned them he was heavily sedated, unlikely to respond. But Olivia needed to do this anyway, for Charlotte, for herself, maybe even for him. She lowered Charlotte slightly, so she rested near Thomas's hand. "This is your daughter. Her name is Charlotte. She's perfect and she's strong and she's here." For a moment, the only sound was the steady beeping of monitors. Then, so slightly Olivia might have imagined it, Thomas's index finger moved, brushing against Charlotte's blanket. "He can hear you," Patricia whispered from the doorway. Olivia looked down at her daughter, then at the broken man before her. The future was uncertain, filled with questions she couldn't yet answer. Would Thomas survive? Could she forgive him? How would they move forward from this, together or apart? But in this moment, there was only one truth that mattered. Charlotte deserved to know her father, and Thomas deserved to know his daughter. "We're here," Olivia said again, her voice stronger. "And we're not going anywhere." Days at the hospital blended together as Olivia split her time between Thomas's bedside and caring for their newborn daughter. The neurological ICU became as familiar as Jen's apartment, the quiet beeping of machines, the hushed conversations of medical staff, the rhythmic whoosh of the ventilator helping Thomas breathe. "You should go home and rest," the nurses would tell her. But home was a concept that had lost its meaning. The house she'd shared with Thomas no longer felt like hers. Jen's apartment was temporary. The only constant in her life now was Charlotte, who seemed to grow and change every day despite the chaos around her. A week after Thomas's stroke, the doctors began reducing his sedation, allowing him to gradually regain consciousness. Olivia was feeding Charlotte in the corner of his room when his eyes first fluttered open. "Thomas?" Patricia noticed first, jumping up from her chair. "Thomas, can you hear me?" His gaze was unfocused, confused. The doctors had warned them that brain damage was possible, that the Thomas who woke up might not be the Thomas they knew. But then his eyes found Olivia, and in them she saw recognition and grief, and something like relief. "You're here," he whispered, his voice raspy from the breathing tube that had been removed just yesterday. "We're here," Olivia corrected gently, standing so he could see Charlotte in her arms. A tear slipped down Thomas's cheek as he looked at his daughter for the first time, truly looked at her, with awareness and understanding. He tried to lift his hand but couldn't seem to coordinate the movement. "The doctors say the weakness on your right side should improve with therapy," Olivia explained, moving closer to the bed. "It will take time, but you're young and otherwise healthy." "I'm so sorry," Thomas said, the words barely audible. "For everything." Olivia felt tears threaten but held them back. "We'll talk about it later. Right now you need to focus on getting stronger." Over the next few days, Thomas's condition improved enough for him to be moved out of the ICU. His speech grew clearer, though he tired easily. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about his prognosis. The stroke had been caught quickly, minimizing the damage, and they believed the remaining tumor could be treated with a combination of radiation and chemotherapy. Through it all, Olivia brought Charlotte to visit daily, allowing father and daughter to begin forming a bond that should have started months ago. She watched Thomas's face soften when Charlotte gripped his finger or yawned in her sleep, and she wondered how she was supposed to feel about the man who had broken her heart for what he thought were the right reasons. It was during one of Charlotte's naps, 2 weeks after Thomas had awakened, that they finally had the conversation they'd been avoiding. "Why didn't you tell me?" Olivia asked, her voice low to avoid waking the baby sleeping in the portable bassinet beside Thomas's bed. "About the diagnosis. About any of it." Thomas looked away, shame evident in his expression. "I thought I was protecting you. From what? From being there for you? From having a choice? From watching me die," he said simply. "The first doctor I saw gave me 6 months to a year. Said the tumor was inoperable. I couldn't bear the thought of you spending your pregnancy watching me deteriorate, knowing you'd be left alone with a newborn and the memory of watching your husband die." Olivia felt anger rise in her chest. "So instead you decided to abandon me? To make me think you just stopped loving me, stopped wanting our baby? I thought a clean break would be easier. That you'd be angry instead of heartbroken. That anger might be easier to heal from." He met her eyes. "I was wrong, so wrong. And then I found a specialist who thought the tumor could be treated. But by then..." He trailed off. "By then you'd already pushed me away," Olivia finished for him. Thomas nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I didn't know how to undo what I'd done. I thought maybe after the surgery, if it was successful, I could try to explain, to ask for forgiveness." He glanced at Charlotte, "To meet my daughter. But the stroke happened first." "Yes." His hand shook as he reached for the water glass on his tray. Olivia helped him steady it, their fingers brushing. "I understand why you thought you were doing the right thing," she said after a moment. "But you took away my agency, Thomas. You made decisions that affected both of us, decisions that should have been ours to make together." "I know," he whispered. "I'll never forgive myself for that." Charlotte stirred in her sleep, making the tiny snuffling noises that usually preceded waking. Both parents looked toward her, momentarily distracted from the weight of their conversation. "What happens now?" Thomas asked as Charlotte settled back into sleep. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you." Olivia had been asking herself the same question for days. What did happen now? Could they rebuild what had been broken? Should they even try? "I don't know," she answered honestly. "A lot has changed." "I've changed." She straightened in her chair. "I found a job, did you know that? Part-time content writing. I can do it from home, be with Charlotte. I joined a single-parent support group. I was starting to build a life without you." Pride and sadness mingled in Thomas's expression. "You always were the strongest of us." "I had to be." She looked down at her hands. "I'm not saying we can't find a way forward, but it won't be the same. It can't be." "I understand," Thomas said, though the pain in his eyes suggested he'd been hoping for a different answer. "You need to focus on getting better," Olivia continued, "and I need to figure out what's best for Charlotte." For all of us, it was the most honest answer she could give. She didn't hate him, knowing the truth had washed away the worst of her anger. But love wasn't enough to repair trust that had been so thoroughly broken. That would take time, effort and a commitment from both of them to build something new from the ashes of what they'd lost. 3 months later, Olivia stood in the doorway of a small apartment, watching Thomas on the floor with Charlotte. He was doing his physical therapy exercises, making them into a game that had their daughter giggling with delight. His right side was still weaker than his left, but he'd made remarkable progress, enough to live independently, to help care for Charlotte during his scheduled visits, to drive himself to his ongoing treatments. The apartment was a compromise, close enough to Jen's place that Olivia could easily bring Charlotte for visits, but separate enough to give them all the space they needed. Thomas's medical bills had been substantial, but his insurance had covered most of them, and the sale of their house had provided enough for both of them to find new places to live. Olivia's phone buzzed with a text from Robin. "Still on for park playdate tomorrow?" She smiled as she replied. Her support network had grown stronger over the months, friends from the single parents group, colleagues from her expanding freelance work, Jen and her friends. Even her relationship with her mother had improved now that they had Charlotte in common. "Everything okay?" Thomas asked, looking up from the floor. "Just confirming plans for tomorrow," Olivia replied, putting her phone away. "Charlotte and I are meeting friends at the park." Thomas nodded, a flicker of something like longing crossing his face. "She'll like that. She loves the swings." "You could come," Olivia found herself saying, "if you're feeling up to it." Surprise and hope lit up his features. "Really? Really?" She sat down on the edge of the couch. "We're not who we were before, Thomas. But that doesn't mean we can't be something else. Something new. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. It wasn't reconciliation in the traditional sense, but it was a beginning, a recognition that their story wasn't over, just changing." Later that night, after putting Charlotte to bed in her crib in Olivia's new apartment, she found herself looking at old photos on her phone. There was one from their honeymoon, both of them laughing on a beach at sunset. Another from the day they moved into their house, paint smudged on Thomas's cheek. A third from early in her pregnancy, his hand protectively covering hers over her barely showing belly. The life in those photos was gone. The people in them had changed in ways they couldn't have imagined. But as Olivia looked at Charlotte sleeping peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling in the soft glow of the nightlight, she felt something settle within her. Not quite peace, but acceptance. The future would unfold one day at a time. Thomas would continue his treatments, his prognosis uncertain but hopeful. Olivia would build her career, raise their daughter, grow stronger in her independence. And together, they would navigate a new kind of family, not the one they had planned, but perhaps one that could still hold love, forgiveness, and second chances. As she turned off the light, Olivia thought about the unthinkable turns her life had taken. From abandonment to the revelation of Thomas's illness, from giving birth alone to co-parenting with a man who was both familiar and a stranger, none of it was what she had expected or wanted, but Charlotte was everything she could have hoped for. And for now, that was enough.